Hi guys, let's go and check out top 10 worst wrestling moments in 2024. Since the 2024 is already behind us and we are starting really strong in 2025 with WWE, this is a perfect time for us to say goodbye to 2024 and wrestling.
These are the top 10 worst things that happened in wrestling in 2024. This list is open to any company, WWE, AEW, TNA, and more.
Okay.
Nobody is off the hook. And to make things interesting, we'll find out at the end which company had the worst 2024.
Each ranking will result in that company getting a strike. The higher the ranking, the more strikes the company will get. The company with the most strikes at the end had the worst 2024. With that out of the way, let's start with...
Number 10, Samantha Irvin leaves
Leaving
WWE. Despite being a re-announcer, the fans are somewhat divided on Samantha Irvin.
And the thing is that, like, she wasn't even that appreciated, unfortunately, even though she was so talented. But she herself admitted that she was not very welcomed by the fans or the company from some people as a ring announcer in WWE, and that she regrets that. However, the biggest reason she left is because she wants to do more. She's a singer after all as well, not only a ring announcer. Like, she has more talents and she wanted to pursue those. Even though, in my opinion, yeah, okay, there's so many singers out there and there's so many talented people. However, you being the ring announcer and being so awesome at it, you would leave a legacy behind you that everybody would remember. So many people would remember, you know. As a singer, maybe, yes, no, who knows? Maybe she's the next Britney Spears or, I don't know, Beyonce or whatever. Like, who knows?
One side loves the energy and personality she brought to reintroductions, while the other thinks she took too much from the show. I think a wrestling show works best when everyone is doing the best job they can, so I always appreciated Irvin's reintroductions. However, in October 2024, Samantha Irvin abruptly left WWE. Apparently, the reason for Irvin's departure was to pursue a music career and other projects that she couldn't focus on while being part of WWE. However, I think the most shocking revelation came directly from Samantha herself. While replying to a comment on social media, Irvin said she never really liked re-announcing, and it was more of a way for her to get into WWE. It was surprising because she seems so passionate about announcing that I would have never guessed she was indifferent to it. I get that Samantha Irvin was just a re-announcer, but she was on a roll and on her way to potentially being the greatest announcer of all time. I wouldn't rule out a return, but if Samantha Irvin comes back as a re-announcer, I think it's going to feel a bit awkward knowing that it was just a stepping stone. Strike one for WWE. Number 9, Jimmy Uso vs. Jay Uso. WWE has a fascinating tradition of having real-life brothers face off at WrestleMania every 15 years. At WrestleMania 10, it was Bret Hart vs. Owen Hart. At WrestleMania 25, it was Jeff and Matt Hardy. And at WrestleMania 40, it was Jimmy and Jay Uso. On paper, Uso vs. Uso sounds like a good idea. They were key parts of the Bloodline storyline that had been going on since 2020. The WrestleMania match had a ton of build and a great story. It seemed impossible to mess up. So here's how they messed it up. The match was slow, with awkward pauses throughout. It just never really got going, which led to the crowd dying, which made things even worse. In fact, Jimmy Uso had to yell at his own daughter to get off her phone.
He wanted to be with his brother. He wanted Jimmy to get away from the damn bloodline and Roman Reigns.
However, the biggest complaint...
I didn't notice that. Oh my god. Because, like, whoever would see his daughter watching the phone would be like, oh yeah, shameful, you know, she's not even supporting her father. I mean, she probably is young, she doesn't know how that will impact his career, but yeah. But at the same, like, WrestleMania had so many other events, so maybe if this was somewhere else on a different event, it would be a bigger deal, but everybody was talking about Cody and everybody wanted to see that, so I kind
of Uso vs. Uso was how many Dane super kicks it had. I'm honestly surprised the Young Bucks didn't file a lawsuit. Guys, that move used to be a finisher. Making it even worse was that Jimmy and Jay didn't sell half of the super kicks. I guess it's those hard Samoan heads. Besides that, the two lacked chemistry. Jimmy Uso's acting in the middle of the match, asking for forgiveness, wasn't good, and the whole ending felt underwhelming. I guess it was kind of fitting that Dude Wipes was the sponsor. What really stinks though is that this was a story that essentially began 14 years ago when the Usos debuted in WWE, and this was the payoff. That's 2 additional strikes against WWE, putting them at 3. Number 8, TNA fires Scott D'Amore. At Bound for Glory 2023, Impact Wrestling announced that the company would be no more. Instead, they were going back to their roots, and they would now be called TNA again. TNA's president, Scott D'Amore, made the announcement with this famous line. The name change became official on January 13th, 2024 at the Hard to Kill pay-per-view. Not only that, but the event also had the largest live gate for the company in nearly a decade, so it seemed like TNA was starting off 2023 on the right foot. However, that didn't last long. About 3.5 weeks later, Scott D'Amore was abruptly fired from his position as TNA president. It was never flat out said what the reason was, but it seems like D'Amore wanted more to be invested in TNA than what Anthem, TNA's parent company, wanted to invest. Either way, it was upsetting for a lot of wrestlers and fans. Scott D'Amore had been instrumental in helping bring TNA back, and a lot of wrestlers enjoyed working for TNA under his leadership. It seemed like the textbook definition of a lull TNA moment. As I said, TNA had a successful relaunch, and they seem to be on a resurgence. Then, TNA fires its president. Now, to be fair, TNA still has done pretty well. About 5 months after Scott D'Amore's firing, TNA hosted their Slammiversary pay-per-view. That had an even higher attendance than Hard to Kill. Additionally, TNA has expanded its partnership with WWE, with more TNA wrestlers appearing in WWE and vice versa. Scott D'Amore launched his own wrestling company in October 2024, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling. So even though D'Amore's firing wasn't a good thing, it seems like everyone rebounded. Still, that's 3 strikes against TNA.
Wow.
Number 7, Chris Jericho's learning tree. Chris Jericho is one of the best wrestlers when it comes to reinventing himself. Y2J seemed to always know exactly when and how to introduce a new character or gimmick, and it was almost always a hit. However, in 2024, Jericho hit a bump in the road. In March 2024, Chris Jericho attempted to mentor Hook. When Hook didn't take the bait, Jericho fought and defeated him to become the FTW champion. Y2J then dubbed himself the Learning Tree and began offering unsolicited and arrogant advice. The Learning Tree soon turned into a faction, with Big Bill, formerly known as Big Cass, and Brian Keith at Chris Jericho's side. Now, I get it. The Learning Tree is meant to take the criticism of Chris Jericho and other veteran wrestlers and turn it into a gimmick designed to get boos. But just because I intentionally made a bad meal doesn't mean the food is now suddenly good. Now, I don't think the Learning Tree is inherently bad. I think it has more to do with Chris Jericho. I feel like a lot of people would agree when I say I don't think it would be bad if Jericho went off TV for a while. Why is that? Well, obviously, there were the sexual misconduct allegations that surfaced in late 2023. As far as I know, there's never been any real closure to it, which left a bad taste in people's mouths. There was also the infamous picture of Jericho's wife participating in the January 6th insurrection that began floating around too. But talking about the Learning Tree itself, it just doesn't have the allure like Jericho's other gimmicks. It seems like he's less focused on creating compelling stories and characters and more on getting names and catchphrases over, like, "Hey guys, TV time and Nueve." I think Jericho and even AEW would be better if we just had a break from Y2J. 4 strikes for AEW. Number 6, the continuing decay of the NWA. Before I dive into this, I gotta say, there's no part of me that enjoys the NWA or any wrestling company failing. That said, I'm gonna be frank about what's happening with the NWA. The COVID-19 pandemic negatively affected the entire wrestling landscape. However, while WWE seemed to come out of it stronger, it was the opposite story for the NWA. Sure, it wasn't just COVID that hurt the NWA, but I think it was the starting point, and things have continued to get worse and worse. In October 2024, NWA Power was taken off the CW app. Granted, NWA wasn't on proper TV, but it was the biggest platform the NWA had ever been on since Billy Corgan took over in 2017. After getting the boot from the CW, NWA began posting episodes of Power to Twitter or X. Now, that wouldn't be such a big issue, but did you even know that? When the NWA was bought by Billy Corgan, it had energy and excitement behind it. But as the years went on, the NWA started to become less relevant and mocked more. Sure, Tyrus as NWA World Champion in 2023 wasn't good, but at least people paid attention. If 2023 was the year of mockery for the NWA, then 2024 was the year of irrelevance. Again, there's no part of me that enjoys saying that, but that's where we're at. That's 5 strikes against NWA, putting them at number 1. At least for now. Number 5, AEW airs the CM Punk Jack Perry footage. Back in August 2023, AEW hosted All In at Wembley Stadium in London. It was the company's biggest event yet in terms of attendance, and what should have been a monumental night for AEW ended up becoming one of its most infamous. Backstage, CM Punk and fellow AEW wrestler Jack Perry got into a real fight. Obviously, there were a number of events that led up to that point, but that whole saga could be a video in of itself. Anyways, the fight was broken up almost as soon as as it started, and CM Punk soon left AEW and returned to WWE about 3 months later. In April 2024, CM Punk did a big tell-all interview addressing the incident at Wembley Stadium for the first time.
No shit.
In response to this, AEW announced that they would show the security camera footage of the fight on their flagship show, Dynamite. The footage aired, and while it did increase viewership, it was a case of short-term gains and long-term pains. The decision didn't do anything to help AEW's image or favorability among fans. In fact, it had the opposite effect. Airing the footage just felt desperate, and it seemed like something WCW would do during its final years. It would have been one thing if AEW aired the footage shortly after the incident, but they chose to show it 7.5 months later. It gave the impression that AEW was in such a need to get people to watch that they had to use a low-quality, silent 45-second clip of an ex-employee to increase viewership. I don't know what's worse, the fact that AEW actually did it, or the fact that it worked. That's 6 more strikes for AEW, but there are still 4 more rankings to go. Number 4, WWE and Money. There are a lot of little things that WWE did in 2024 that I'm gonna lump together. The reason is that, while they are different issues, they all revolve around one thing.
It's all about the money! It's all about the money!
Let's start with the most obvious, WWE's sponsors. Now, WWE has always had advertisers as part of their show, but it's getting ridiculous. Granted, WWE has been ramping up sponsors for a few years now, but 2024 was no exception. Any available spot around the ring seems to have a logo on it now. Not only that, but because there are so many advertisers, it takes time away from the actual show, especially during the PLEs. However, an even bigger offense than that is WWE's adoption of dynamic ticket pricing.
I actually don't mind it that much because it is still subtle. I do mind the ads. The ads, I kind of mind them, okay? I mind the ones where you are still having the show, but then you have the ad, and they mute the show to show the ad, and then you are watching the show, but of course nothing really is happening, so it's just prolonging the show for no reason, so we can have the ad. So, and now we have SmackDown that is 3 hours long, and all I saw is longer theme songs and more ads. So that's what I am a bit bothered by. However, having these small pictures here and there from sponsors, it is completely understandable. They live on that. Besides selling the tickets, besides selling the merchandise, they live on sponsors and ads. So they need this money in order to get better and better quality wrestling show, and better quality wrestlers. So I feel like it is fine as long as they are providing and giving us the show that we want. I have no problem. Once it is becoming more relevant and literally overtaking the whole scene, that the actual wrestlers are not doing their job or the company isn't doing its job, then I feel like I would be bothered by it.
Tickets to adjust in price based on things like demand and timing. This has resulted in WWE tickets skyrocketing in price. WrestleMania 41 tickets, for example, are well into the 4 figures, and some even go for 5. The cheapest tickets I found for both nights of WrestleMania 41 were $1,000, and that's not even counting all the taxes and fees that are added on. But hey, people are still buying them. Also, let's get rid of the post-show press conferences. I know this doesn't exactly fit into this point, but hey, those have sponsors too. Really, the media scrum/press conference idea was neat when AEW introduced it, but I think it's run its course. Particularly for WWE, they're just corporate PR, and WWE patting themselves on the back. Sure, there's the occasional highlight like Cody Rhodes and Jay Uso getting drunk, but those are few and far between. Plus, whenever a good question gets asked, like the Vince McMahon scandal or diversity issues, the response is usually just corporate copy and paste and doesn't really answer anything. That's a whopping 7 strikes for WWE, tying them and AEW. Number 3, AEW's Decline. Like with the NWA, I don't get a kick out of AEW struggling. However, before I get into that, I must acknowledge AEW's biggest business win in 2024. In October, the company announced it had signed a new media rights deal with Warner Bros. Discovery for $550 million, an increase from their previous deal. That's excellent news for AEW, and something that can't be ignored, because there was a lot of bad news in 2024. One of the most obvious is AEW's decline in attendance. Pictures of half-empty AEW arenas were not uncommon in 2024, but what's worse than declining attendance is declining TV viewership. Pretty much all 3 of AEW's TV shows saw a decrease in viewers from each quarter in 2024. Even AEW's flagship show Dynamite brought in fewer viewers in the 4th quarter of 2024 than when Collision and Rampage launched. In fact, AEW Rampage got canceled in December 2024 2024, presumably because of the numbers it was bringing in. There were also some backstage issues with AEW as well. Wrestlers were being left at home because the company didn't have anything for them, as well as AEW extending some wrestlers' contracts, despite said wrestlers wanting to leave. In general, AEW doesn't have the same excitement that it had when it first launched in 2019. There are a ton of reasons for that, but regardless, 2024 was a mixed bag for AEW, to say the least. 8 strikes for All Elite Wrestling. Number 2, Tessa Blanchard returns to TNA. In 2020, Tessa Blanchard was a rising star in women's wrestling. She was signed to TNA, but it seemed inevitable that she would end up in either WWE or AEW. She was that good. In fact, Blanchard became the first and only woman to hold the TNA World Championship. Tessa was on top of the world, and then she destroyed it all with one tweet. In January 2020, Tessa Blanchard posted on Twitter saying, "Hey women, try supporting one another. Cool things happen." This prompted backlash from multiple female wrestlers who said Tessa had bullied women backstage, publicly put them down, tried to blacklist people, and even spat in a black woman's face and called her the N-word. Despite this, TNA stood by her and only fired Tessa Blanchard when she refused to come to work. Rather than apologize, Blanchard pretty much doubled down. This forced Tessa to wrestle in Mexico, as no US company would touch her. That was until December 2024, when TNA secretly rehired Tessa Blanchard. In fact, wrestlers and even some higher-ups in the company didn't know Tessa was being brought back until she arrived backstage for her return. The locker room was reportedly split on Tessa being brought back, but there were people who were glad to see her. Now, it's not so much Tessa Blanchard herself returning that makes this list, but how TNA handled it and the message it sent. The fact that they felt they needed to hide Blanchard's return is a red flag to begin with. Yep. However, it feels like a slap in the face. TNA fired Scott D'Amore, someone who is very pro TNA, helped rebuild the brand, and never embarrassed the company. But they rehired Tessa Blanchard, someone with a list of terrible allegations, and someone who wouldn't film promo videos from her home while being the world champion. I get from TNA's side that they're losing talent, but the way they went about bringing Tessa Blanchard back was completely wrong. 9 strikes against TNA. Now this next ranking will determine which company had the worst 2024.
Okay, let's go.
And number 1, Vince McMahon and lawsuits. You knew this was coming. Sure, the allegations against Vince McMahon are just that, allegations. But if just 1% is true, that's more than enough to earn a spot on this list. The Janelle Grant allegations are the most well known, but there were so many more. Allegations surfaced from a previously unpublished statement from Ashley Massaro, and Vince McMahon and WWE were later hit with an entirely different lawsuit from the infamous Ring Boy scandal. To say WWE's lawyers and PR team had their work cut out for them in 2024 is an understatement. That gives WWE 10 more strikes and gives them the dishonor of having the worst 2024. Now that doesn't mean WWE was...
They had the worst year overall, but they had the best year as well. This is the thing. The bigger you are, the bigger your accomplishments, but also the bigger your losses, the bigger your mistakes are, because they are on blast. Plus, the company itself is big, so everything is major. All the news are major. Whatever happens, it's like a big deal, because the company is a big deal. So that makes sense. I kind of knew it's going to be WWE.
Wasn't good in 2024. Far from it. I'm still amazed at the stuff Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio got away with. To see what they did with each other,
PG,
watch this video.
Not so. Yeah, I did. PG, I don't think so. That's what I like about it. Like, it is PG, but we had on SmackDown, the first SmackDown 2025, Paul Heyman swear at us loud and clear. The audience were so happy, the fans were so happy about it. Like, it's not really PG anymore, and that's what I love about it. Of course, they're not bringing the moments that we would see with like the sexual moments in the ring itself, a bit hint here and there of like relationship between like Liv and Dom and whatnot, but not really. Like, it was uncomfortable at the start, but now like they are really back to like being more respectful, which is good. Like, they give you just pieces here and there, and that's the thing. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.